Okay. Last week we discussed the interwar period and we stopped at the Munich agreement and the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement and their consequences. And now we're going to actually discuss about the start of World War II. So this week we should try to cover all of World War II if we can, so it's a big topic. So let's see where we left it. With the violation of the Munich agreement by Hitler, when essentially he helped create a Slovakian state and then took whatever was left of Czechoslovakia as part of the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, the conservative leaders of France and the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Daladier in France and Prime Minister Chamberlain in England, decided that enough was enough and that Hitler ultimately cannot be somebody to accommodate with, and also decided that they had run out of time. Their whole goal was to accommodate until the great rearmament programs had been completed, and now they didn't have a choice. So they were determined to stand up to Hitler in his next challenge. And his next challenge came to Poland. Now, let's talk about the Polish issue a bit. Now, both the Soviets and the Nazis were determined to see the destruction of Poland. They considered Poland as a Saisonstadt, which means a spring nation, a nation that will only last for a season. And they saw the survival of the regimes tied to the annihilation of Poland. Now, initially, the Nazis had tried to work on Poland by using the principle of nationalities and mostly focusing on the rectification of the borders, especially the area of Danzig. Now, the Poles themselves had acted rather foolishly in the interwar period. Despite being one of the countries that had gained the most from the Versailles treaties, they were also irredentists. And in the case of Czechoslovakia, they had actively participated and worked with the Nazis in Germany to destroy Czechoslovakia. So they essentially had also used the principle of nationality to undermine the very framework that Poland had created Poland. So they had already made it very easy for Adolf Hitler to make demands on Poland based on the principle of nationalities. Now, the good news for the Poles is that, as we said, the UK and France had come to the conclusion that further appeasement of Hitler will be disastrous. So when Hitler made a number of demands on Poland, knowing that it has the backing of the Soviet Union, the Poles refused to accept them and to accede to them. Poland, by the way, was also ruled by an authoritarian regime. And France and the United Kingdom supported it. Thus, on September 1st, 1939, against September 1st, 1939, the German army known as the Wehrmacht crossed the Polish border and initiated the Polish-German War. Now, the United Kingdom and France, in reaction to this, mobilized but do not declare war. Why? Benito Mussolini makes one last attempt to be relevant in European and world politics by offering to mediate. But this fails. If you want to learn more about this early period, the movie The Darkest Hour, that came out recently, was pretty good about it. So on September 3rd, 1939, the United Kingdom and France declare war on Germany. Almost 20 years since the guns had fallen silent on November 11, 1918, Europe is again at war. Now, here's an interesting question. Why did war happen in 1939 and not 1938? Okay? Why is this important? Despite what everybody says, and despite the accusations leveled against Daladier and Chamberlain, especially in the early years of the war, there's actually a book called The Guilty Men, that accused them for their accommodation and appeasement. The reality is that we now know that both Deladier and Chamberlain, when Hitler invaded the remnants of Czechoslovakia, had become determined that there will be a war between the United Kingdom and France. They expected war. And this is 1938, so why not attack? If you remember what I told you, Hitler in 1938 was not completely in control of the situation. There was a powerful faction within the German military that might have overthrown him if it had gone to a war with the European powers. But they still believed they were not ready, and in the United Kingdom, within the Conservative Party, there was a powerful faction that still believed it could accommodate Hitler. There was still a willingness to trust Hitler because they were so scared of the Soviets, of the communists, okay? So they gave him time. There was hope that Hitler would attack the Soviets first. But as we know, Stalin took care of that with the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement. So, with neither side, nor Stalin, neither Deladier and Chamberlain, willing to essentially make the first move, essentially not trusting that the anti-German forces would help you, there was an unwillingness to start the war again until it was cleared up. So, the key explanation is the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement. Once that agreement is signed, it becomes very clear to the conservative governments of France and England that Hitler is going to turn west. That he has decided to defer the war with the Soviet Union to the future and has decided to prioritize the war with the West. In another name, in the great blinking way, between the Soviet Union and the Western powers blinked first. Okay, why didn't they just offer a better accommodation deal to Hitler then? Offer Poland. Let Hitler have Poland. Okay? Essentially beat the Soviets in their own game of accommodation. Well, the problem is that they were now terrified that any accommodation they gave to Hitler wouldn't end, that essentially now Hitler would play the game of essentially asking his two potential victims to offer as much of their body as they can in order not to take it all. So he could go to the Westerners and say, give me Poland. Then he will go to the Soviets and say, give me Ukraine. And then he will go to the Westerners and say, give me Belgium. So there was a fear that if they didn't act, Hitler will simply become more powerful, and more importantly, maybe the Soviets will cooperate further. Rather than just a détente, which is what Molotov-Ribbentrop is, they might actually fully ally. So that's why you get the war in 1939. Now let's look at the balance of power in 1939. On the one side we have UK, France and Poland, and on the other side we have Germany. Now, when it comes to divisions, okay, infantry divisions, the UK and France had 114, while the Poles had 39, for a total of 153 divisions. But let's remember, the UK and French divisions are in the west, the Polish divisions are in the east. Germany had 141 divisions at its disposal. So it's actually pretty balanced in that sense. There are about 7 million troops within the Allied armies, 4 million Germans in the Wehrmacht, but of those 7 million troops of the Allied armies, only about 3 million are actually available for action in Western Europe. Tanks. On the Western Front, the Allies have the upper hand with 3,254 tanks, while the Poles only have 880, most of them very old and obsolete, while the Germans have 2,445 tanks, a lot of them, by the way, Czechoslovakian tanks that were taken over when Czechoslovakia was dissolved. Armored divisions, this is the important part. The Allies had about 10, or the equivalent of 10 armored divisions on the Western Front, because it's not enough just to have tanks, you have to use them properly. The Poles had 0. The Germans had 12 armored divisions, and they had a much better doctrine for using their armored divisions. Aircraft, the Germans have a massive advantage here. They have 5,000 airplanes against 2,000 to 3,000 Allied and 400 Polish airplanes. So they have the big advantage in air power. Major naval units, when it comes to the Navy, the Germans are beat. Unlike World War I, in World War II, and in the interwar years, that Hitler or the minor Republic never really aimed to try to create the kind of naval power that Kaiser Wilhelm had tried. So the Navy is heavily outnumbered by 52 major surface units, aircraft carriers, battleships, heavy cruisers, and only 9 German ones. If you look at tons, it's the same. But if you look at the share of global wealth, an indicator estimate of how industrially powerful the state is, this is a massive difference from World War I. Germany is about as powerful as England and France together, despite having lost the war, simply because of its bigger latent potential. Germany has become about as powerful as the two other great powers. So, what's going on? From September 1st to September 29th, we have a Battle of Poland. Germany invades Poland, and then later on the Soviet Union invades, so the Soviets claim that they had the permission to enter Poland. There's a big debate about there, because the thing is, Polish military junta was a collective information, and there seems to be information that some of the members asked the Soviets to invade, others of the members refused, so it's a mix. Point being, the Soviets and the Nazis gave their hands over the dead body of bourgeois Poland. And this is essentially the start of mass atrocities against Jews and Poles. As the Germans are invading Poland and the Soviets, they start executing Polish intelligentsia on the side of the Soviets, while the Germans just start executing anybody who's a Pole or a Jew. Now, September 7 to 16th, the French launched a major offensive called the Saar Offensive, okay? Their goal was to essentially force Hitler to pull back forces from Poland to fight in the West. But Hitler decided, no. The Germans remained committed to destroying Poland, and then they will turn to the West. It helped that the Allies were not fully committed yet to the offensive, despite the fact that the offensive included a massive amount of troops, about 2 army corps. The French were very hesitant, and as a result, they didn't really do a lot of damage. At the same time, the Soviet Union goes to the Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, and forces them to become protectorates of the Soviet Union. All of them were authoritarian regimes. They essentially semi-survived because of the Polish role. With Poland out of the picture, they see the writing on the wall and they give up. Now, they try to also do that with Finland, but unlike the states of the Baltic, the Finns refuse. They declare, we want our independence. And believing that they will be supported by the Western powers, Churchill historically said Finland is a beacon of light in darkness, they fight. And this leads to the so-called Winter War. It's a war between the Soviets and the Finns that lasts from 1939 to 1940. It goes very badly for the Soviets initially. They are humiliated. And the Soviet Union is expelled from the League of Nations. With the end of the Saar Offensive, the situation in the Western Front becomes weird. In the sea and in the air, World War II continues as the German Navy, primarily using submarines and the Air Force, the Luftwaffe, fight against the Royal Navy. But on land, the Allies don't do anything. If you ever watched any of those superhero animes like Dragon Ball or something, right? So the bad guy is overpowering, going like, ah! And the heroes are just staying there and watching, and they wait until like the bad guy 5 minutes later completes the transformation, and then they attack. This is kind of what's going on. The whole period from the late 1939 to early 1940, the Allies are just sitting there, stockpiling weapons and doing nothing. while the Germans happily start moving their whole army from Poland into the Western Front. Why? They kind of hope that the Germans and the Soviets will still fight. Yeah, they're still hoping for that, essentially. There is a crisis of confidence in the British government, which is what will lead to Churchill taking power, in which with the destruction of Poland, a lot of are asking, like, why are we fighting among the elites? So that causes the pause. This is catastrophic, because essentially, the whole period, Germany is defenseless on the West. Well, not completely defenseless, and they're fortified areas. A lot of the problem is World War I. A lot of the commanders of the Allied armies got their experience from World War I, and in World War I, the iron rule was the attack sucks. If you have to attack, you're going to lose a lot. So they expected that if they try to attack in Germany, even if the Germans have weak forces, they're going to hold them back. They were wrong. The war in the East against Poland showed that the new combined arm tactics of tanks, mechanized or motorized infantry, although most of the German army was still on horses, and airplanes, especially dive bombers, can create catastrophic situations for the enemy very quickly and overcome determined defense, but not always. Anyway, February to June 1940, the Germans, instead of moving west, move north. They invade Norway in their goal to secure their northern flank and to get their hands on the Norwegian production of heavy water, which is very important for the production of nuclear weapons. Since Germany and England have already had an active investigation into nuclear power, okay? Norway falls in April after fierce fighting by Allied forces. The movie you're going to watch is about the invasion of Norway later on. With Norway conquered, Hitler feels secure enough, and with his agreement with the Soviets seeming to hold, Hitler feels secure enough to finally strike in the West. So, on May to June 1940, Operation Felgelb and Operation Bluebird, I might make that wrong, are launched against Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Denmark, and France, launching essentially the Blitzkrieg on the West. The idea that the Germans have for France is very similar to the early ideas they had in the Schlieffen Plan in World War I, that the main effort is going to be through the north, through Belgium and the Netherlands. The difference is that, unlike in the Schlieffen Plan, the Ardennes region will become extremely important. By the way, why don't they attack through Alsace-Lorraine? The Maginot Line. People make fun of the Maginot Line. They consider it a failure, but it actually worked greatly. The Germans refused to attack the Maginot Line. The problem was the French didn't build the Maginot Line all the way up to Belgium. They ran out of money and will. So of course the Germans did not attack the forts, they passed them through. So through Ardennes, they launched an attack to sever the connection between the Maginot Line defenses and the British and Allied armies in Belgium. Also, Italy finally takes the side of the Axis and declares war on the UK and France and invades southern France, trying to get the Alpine regions. The Italians, by the way, are defeated by the French. So at the same time that France is losing the war, in the south the French mounted troops beat the Italians up. So that becomes kind of like a continuation of the story. Belgium surrenders, and the Anglo-French forces there are evacuated via Dunkirk. So here we are. So it's very similar in a way to what we saw in World War I, okay? Remember, the Schlieffen Plan was essentially we're going to attack through here, okay? And this time the Allies were ready. Most of the French army and British armies are located here, and unlike in World War I, where the Belgians were neutral, this time the Belgians and the Dutch, both of them were prepared for the war. So the defense line was here. The problem was the Belgians and the Dutch were not actually cooperating with the Allies, because the Belgians had been pissed off by the English because they were refusing to give them an alliance. So the great difference is this. In World War I, the strong part of the punch of the Swiss line was in the north. Okay? And the pivot was like this. That was the idea. In World War II, the strong punch was in the south. And essentially the idea was to pivot like that. Okay? That would separate the powerful French armies here in the Maginot Line from the mechanized French and English armies up here, and essentially break them into two groups. This was a very risky strategy. Everybody thinks, when you think of Blitzkrieg, of powerful armored divisions racing like crazy, or they were racing, but they were not powerful. There was a very strong tip on the front of the pen, which was the armored division, but if you looked behind in the rest of it, it was extremely thin. Those divisions were essentially racing against time. If the French armies had hit like this, they would have destroyed them. The whole idea was to disrupt so badly the logistics of the French and Allied armies that they wouldn't be able to react. That instead of closing the gap, which will be very easy, and then destroying these isolated armored divisions once they run out of oil, then the tanks are just sitting ducks and anything, they started doing stupid things like retreating like this, retreating like this. So they end up in Dunkirk. Okay? Marshal Pétain, a hero of World War I, becomes leader of France, and he essentially surrenders to the Germans and the Italians. So France is knocked out of the war. Hitler succeeds where Schiffland and Moltke the younger failed. He avoids the two-front war, defeats his enemies in detail, first the Poles and then the West, and defeats France very quickly, in a matter of less than a month. Half of France is occupied directly by the Germans in military occupation, while the southern side is ruled by increasingly authoritarian and fascist conservative Catholic regime, the Vichy, which also enters into conflict with the UK. As a result of the collapse of France, there's finally a change of government for the UK. This is where the Darkest Hour movie covers it. And Winston Churchill is replaced by Neville Chamberlain. And Churchill vows to fight on. He says, we will fight them anywhere, on the beaches, in our hamlets, in the air. We will not give up, we will never surrender. Now, Hitler now has a problem. He wins. He conquered France. But the damn British have this bulldog that refuses to make peace. So he has to figure out how to conquer England. His problem is, well, England is an island. And to conquer islands, you need ships. And if you don't have ships, maybe you really want those islands, maybe you really like those islands, but you can't conquer them. And pretty simply put, the Germans don't have ships. The British Navy is much more powerful than the small German Navy. So he does unleash his submarines to unrestricted submarine warfare, hoping to hunker them down, but that takes time. So Goering, fat guy, white uniform air marshal, goes to Hitler and tells him, well, if you let me use the Luftwaffe, I'm going to win. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fight in a battle of attrition against the British Air Force, and I'm going to destroy the British Air Force, and then I'm going to bombard the cities of England into surrender. This had worked in the Netherlands. The Netherlands surrendered when Hitler threatened to level Amsterdam. Okay? He threatened to bombard Rotterdam and Amsterdam to level them as cities, so the Dutch decided enough is enough. Their armies had already been defeated. They did fight, unlike what many people think, but they decided that having a country, even if it's conquered, is more important than not having a country, even if it means surrendering. Well, the British are more stubborn. So, June 1940, you have a beginning of the Battle of Britain. The At the same time, across the great ocean, the Great Republic, as Churchill says it, starts a massive rearmament operation. You see, after World War I, the Americans completely destroyed their army, because that's what you used to do when you were a conservative liberal country. You win the war, you get rid of your army. So now they're very worried about this, so they start rebuilding the army. And they start giving massive material support to the UK. So unlike World War I, there's very strong indicators the Americans intend to enter the war again. However, Roosevelt is not able to yet go to war because isolationism in the United States is still very strong. Just as in the case of World War I, there are many Americans that are opposed to a European entry of the war. And German Americans are especially active. And this time they actually can claim that, you know what, this is all the fault of the Europeans, so let them get it out. Because of the interwar period. What happens in the rest of the world? 1940, the Soviet Union formally annexes the Baltic states. On the September 27th, 1940, officially Italy, Japan, and Germany become allies in the X-axis. In the Balkans, the Germans essentially play the game of arbitrator to nationalist conflict. They forced Romania to give up territory to Hungary that included a big Hungarian majority, and they forced Romania to ally with Germany. In Yugoslavia, there is a pro-German allied government. Well, Hungary, Slovakia, and Bulgaria all enter on the side of the Axis because they don't want to end up like Romania, losing territory. In Africa, Italy attacks British forces in Egypt and the Horn of Africa. By the beginning of 1941, the British have pretty much defeated them. Okay, the Italian soldiers are not incompetent, they're actually very brave. The Italian Air Force especially has some very, very brave pilots. But the problem is the army is crap at the organizational level and Mussolini is an idiot. So that's primarily why the Italians are getting so badly beat up. Now, angry with the successes of Hitler in France and in the Balkans, feeling that he has been left out of the whole glory and feeling that he's becoming the junior partner to the alliance, the little dwarf, nothing better than Admiral Horthy of Hungary, Mussolini decides to force a fait accompli in the Balkans, to do something by himself and show Hitler that he is a respected ally. So in 1940, 27th of October, he gives an ultimatum to Greece, where he says to the Greeks, essentially, let my army cross through your territory, to essentially become protectorate. The Greek dictator Ioannis Metaxas says, alors c'est de la war, which in the Greek popular view translates to orchi, no. So on the 28th, Italy attacks the Greeks and gets defeated as well. Okay, between the 28th of October 1940, December 1940, the Italians try to invade Greece, they are beaten back badly, and the Greeks invade Albania, which is a protectorate of the Italians. With the situation for Italy becoming so bad, Hitler starts becoming worried. He believes that Italy is essentially creating opportunities for the United Kingdom to project power into Europe. So, for example, the UK helps Greece in its war with air force and naval support. So he becomes prepared to intervene in the Balkans to help him. Meanwhile, in Asia, remember, there's already going on, since 1937, the war between Japan and China. And Thailand, which is an independent state, called Siam back then, takes advantage of the collapse of France and attacks French Indochina in the Franco-Thai War. The Japanese mediate and end the war, but essentially what happens is that the French accept Japanese control over Indochina. Hitler is triumphant, simple as that. Think about what he has attained in a year. Poland and France are out of the war. He has conquered almost all of Poland. He controls half of France. Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Netherlands are either under German control or occupation. Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia are directly allied to Germany. Italy has entered the war on the side of Germany. The United Soviet Socialist Republics are sticking, Stalin is sticking to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they're busy fighting Finland. And most importantly, the United States of America has not entered the war. Look, he's won. Everything that is blue is directly controlled by the Germans. Anything that is yellow is an ally of the Germans. The only countries that are actually fighting the Germans is England, okay, and Greece. He has the 1,000-year Reich in his hands. Leverstratum over here, they kill all the Poles and the Jews and you take their land, okay? Heavy industry, Belgium, under his control. Northern France, under his control. Norway, under his control with its heavy water. You stick back and you wait until you produce nuclear weapons and then you go middle finger to the world. Unfortunately, most of the scientists that were helping the German nuclear program go up, well, they were Jews. So they were all gone by this time, either dead or running away to save their lives. So why is there no peace? There are 4 reasons why the world does not have today the United European States of German Europe. Okay? First of all, Churchill. Okay? Churchill is very important. He's a drunk, he's a racist, he's kind of a difficult chap, but he does persuade the British population to fight on and the British elites not to give up. He is able to motivate the population. As one of the characters in the movie says, he weaponizes the English language and he sends it to fight war. Okay? So, either the expectation that the Soviet Union will in the end stop being a friend of Germany and go to war, or that the United States will enter the war and change the balance of power gives hope to the British. And US support actually permits Britain to counter the German attacks. Secondly, his demands for a peace are just too extreme. He wants Belgium, the Netherlands, and northern France to be part of the German Reich forever. This is unacceptable to even the most pro-German conservative British elites, especially Belgium and northern France. Third, after Munich, well, no one trusts Hitler. He broke his word too often. It's important to gain trust in politics. It's not something that's easily lost. Once you lose it as a politician, you can't win it very easily, and Hitler had lost his. And finally, Hitler, in order to make peace, demanded that Britain permit Japan to do whatever it wanted in the Pacific, which essentially puts under threat Britain's Indian colonies. So it's unacceptable. Also, Hitler, as we're going to see, fails to organize his occupied territories and to utilize the resources to build a war machine that will take on the world. And now we come to 1941. And perhaps the most important decision. We now understand, now you understand, why there was no peace at the end of 1940. Can you give me, write in your notebooks please, at least 2 reasons. There were 4 reasons I gave you about why there wasn't any peace in 1940. So please write in your notebooks at least 2 reasons. Okay? Because this is important. So we know why the UK refused to make peace with Adolf Hitler when he essentially won. Okay, 4 reasons, please write 2 of them down. Then we have to answer the next question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
I gave you 4 reasons about why the United Kingdom and Germany couldn't make peace in the end of 1940, when Hitler seemed to have won everything. I would like you to at least write 2 of those reasons down in your notebook. Okay? So, the next thing we have to explain is this. We understand why Britain doesn't make peace. why the hell does Hitler and Japan expand the war? Which is what happens in 1941. Okay? Hitler invades the Soviet Union in December 1941. Now, actually not December, in spring, but I don't remember the exact date. I guess I show that I don't care about Russian history that much. Shame on me. And this is a massive decision, because until that point, Stalin was more or less willing to accept German domination in Western Europe. Why does he do it? There are essentially four reasons again. First of all, after witnessing the capabilities of the German army in the West, and after witnessing the terrible performance of the Soviet army against Finland, Hitler is determined and persuaded that he can win a war against the Soviet Union very quickly, that he will not face the situation faced by Napoleon, okay? And he will not face the situation faced by the Germans in World War I. I remind you, in World War I, the Germans won against Russia. Okay? The story you invade Russia and you lose is not completely true. Napoleon failed, fine. But Ludendorff, Hindenburg, and Mackensen, they went all the way to essentially Kiev, and they won. They just lost a world war in the West. But guess what? There's no West anymore. So Hitler thinks, I got better technology, better tactics, the Soviets have a crappy army, I can do this. So he thinks the war will be big. Secondly, he's worried that if he waits, Stalin will betray him and ally with the United Kingdom or the United States against him. Okay? He doesn't want to give any more time to Stalin to complete his reorganization of his army, because Stalin is also busy rebuilding the Soviet army, especially after the terrible performance of the Soviet army in Finland. So Hitler feels that he has to launch a preventive war, that if he waits a year or 2 years, Stalin will be strong enough to threaten him. Third, remember all those Bulgarians, especially all Romanians, Hungarians, Slovakians, you know, all of them allied with Germany out of fear, but they also expect stuff from Germany. Romania is kind of angry that Germany forced it to sacrifice Transylvania to Hungary, and, well, it says, I need to get something in return. Well, since he can't have them eating each other anymore, the only place where he can give them something is the Soviet Union. And finally, he's racist. He's racist, an anti-communist. Fundamentally believes that the Soviet Union is made up of Untermensch, underhumans, ruled by a bunch of Jews, with a stupid ideology, and they're Slavs anyway, so all he has to do is send his Teutonic Aryan race in, and they'll go like, and then Untermensch are all gonna surrender. Fundamentally thinks this is gonna be easy. At the same time, Japan attacks the United States of America. Okay, what's going on here? Why do this twice? Well, what's happening with the Japanese is that, well, as you can guess, when you're a country of, let's say, I don't remember how many the Japanese were back then, 70 million, and you're trying to conquer a country of about 600 million, like China, you're gonna run in trouble. Their war of conquest in China is going into a bloody stalemate. The Chinese are not giving up, primarily because they're well supported by the US. Also, the United States has an oil embargo against the Japanese, which essentially destroys the ability of the Japanese army and navy to support the war in China. Now, the Japanese are also secure, so they need to get rid of the embargo, they feel, in order to conquer China. As long as America exists as a player, the Chinese will never give up, the Japanese army will be starved for resources. So that's the first reason. Second reason, Japan and the Soviet Union have a non-aggression pact. And when the Germans invade the Soviet Union, the Japanese are 100% sure that they're not going to be attacked by the Soviets while they're fighting the Americans. The Japanese had attacked the Soviets, I remind you, in the interwar period. Both times they had been badly defeated, so they were not in the mood of picking a fight with the Soviet Union. But now they know that the Soviet Union is also not going to pick a fight with Japan. It won't be a two-front war. The army leaders that dominate Japanese politics are determined to fight a war now. The Navy would actually prefer to wait until conquest in China and maybe a changing situation in Europe permitted the Japanese Navy to build up its strength to challenge the Americans head on. But the army is committed to the Chinese expansion. They need oil for their tanks and their airplanes, and they need it now. Finally, the United States is very clear that it will not permit Japanese expansion against the Dutch East Indies, what is today Indonesia, which was a colony of the Netherlands. Yeah, the Netherlands had a colony, all of Indonesia. And you see the problem, the importance is that the Dutch East Indies are an oil field back there. They were the Saudi Arabia of the time. That's why Shell, you know the Shell Oil Company? Shell Oil Company is a Dutch company. It was a Dutch company initially. Okay? It was the Royal Dutch Oil Company. Okay? So their army really wants that. Well, guess what? The Americans say you can't have it, so they have to have it. So they also attack America at Pearl Harbor. And this leads to an expansion of the war. Let's look at what's going on. In 1941 in the Eastern Front, the Nazis initially invade the Balkans where they helped Italy defeat Greece, and they also overthrow the Yugoslav government and occupy all of Yugoslavia. This permits them to reward Bulgaria, which gets the area that's today the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and it permits them to create a Croat state, a client state, while making Serbia a tiny country. Now, the Soviets are completely unprepared for Operation Barbarossa. It's not that Stalin did not know or expect an invasion. He expected an invasion. He just didn't expect the invasion at that time. He expected it a year later. So the Soviet army's posture was not very good. So between 22nd of June 1941, there's your date, 22nd of June 1941, start of Operation Barbarossa, and 16th November of 1941, 3 million Axis troops invade the USSR. Wait a minute, Professor, didn't the Germans have 4 million troops in September 1939? Yes, well, here's the thing. Hitler promised these people an easy life. So he actually demobilized part of the army, and he kept the rest of it in France doing occupation things and going to French cabarets. So he mostly invades with 3 million troops, a big part of which is made up of Romanians, Hungarians, and everything. Anti-Bolshevik crusade. Well, the thing is, they're very successful. The Soviet armies completely collapse. The Axis overruns all of Ukraine, Belarus. The Soviets, you lose massive amount of troops at Kiev in the greatest encirclement in the history of the human race. 600,000 Soviet troops are captured. Essentially, the Polish army, the equivalent of the Polish army of 1939, is captured just in one battle. Leningrad, Sevastopol are besieged, and even Moscow is attacked. Well, two things happen. First of all, the Soviets fight like crazy, especially in front of Moscow. And when it becomes clear that Japan does not intend to attack the Soviet Union, that crack Eastern Siberian army forces are moved with the Trans-Siberian Railway all the way from Vladivostok and Manchuria directly into Moscow and fed into the battle. Secondly, winter begins. So Japan and the weather essentially saved Moscow. Look at the map over here that gives you an idea of the extent of the territory conquered in the opening phases, okay? But what do you notice? The Germans are essentially attacking on two different fronts. The south front, whose objective is the Caucasus and its oil fields, here at Batum and over here. And the north front and central front, whose objectives are to take Moscow, Leningrad. This area over here is called the Pripyat Marshes. It's, even today, it's pretty much non-negotiable. So, this is very successful, but it's stopped outside of Moscow thanks to the change in the weather and the arrival of the Eastern Siberian divisions. What happens in the rest of Europe in 1941? As I said, very quickly in the Balkan campaign, the Germans conquered Yugoslavia, where there was a coup and overthrew the pro-German government. They defeated Greece. In Africa and the Middle East, there is a pro-Axis government of Iraq. Remember that under the League of Nations system, the ex-colonies of the Central Powers, plus the areas of the Ottoman Empire that were detached from it, had become mandates. Technically independent states under the protection of a mandatory power. Iraq had been a mandate of the United Kingdom. Syria was a mandate of France. Well, what happened is, as you can probably guess, people were not happy about this. The victory of Kemal Atatürk in Turkey and the creation of the Turkish Republic had galvanized nationalist Arabic elements within Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. They were demanding full independence through, in these areas, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a much more Islamist Sharia law-based organization, had a lot more influence than Kemalism in a sense, but they all agreed nationalism, modernization, leads to the creation of a pro-Axis government that tries to break away from Iraq and thus place the Iraqi oil fields at the disposal of the Axis. Well, the United Kingdom does not permit that, very quickly goes in, flap, 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 restoration of colonial imperialist, allied democratic republican rule. Something like that. The Soviet Union and the United Kingdom have no intention of letting Iran try anything weird. If you remember from previous classes, Iran was essentially what the Ottoman Empire would be if the Severance Treaty had happened. It was technically an independent state, but it was divided into huge areas of influence. The northern one controlled by the Soviets, the southern one controlled by the British. The Iranians decided to take advantage of World War II and break off the plans, but the Soviets and the British are very quick about it, no. So they quickly get rid of any pro-German influences. In the Levant, Syria and Lebanon, on the one side you have Vichy French forces, and on the other side you have Free French forces under De Gaulle and the UK. They're fighting each other. The United Kingdom overruns Italian North Africa and the Horn of Africa, which leads Hitler to send Marshal Erwin Rommel with his Africa Corps to try and save the African campaign. And this leads to a seesaw campaign between, on the one hand, Field Marshal Montgomery of the British, and on the other hand, Field Marshal Erwin von Rommel of the Germans. In the Asia Pacific, on 7th December 1941, the Japanese, under Admiral Yamamoto, make a surprise attack against the great American naval base at Pearl Harbor. Yesterday, the last week, we learned about the speech of infamy where Roosevelt declares war. The attack is successful. It destroyed part of the US Pacific Fleet, but it sank a lot of battleships. Did I make a mistake? I'm sure I made a mistake. No. But it missed the aircraft carriers. The Japanese wanted those aircraft carriers sunk. Unfortunately for them, the three big fleet carriers of the United States Navy, the Enterprise, the Yorktown, and the Hornet, were all far away. So that's a problem. Also, at the same time, they attack the United Kingdom forces in the Pacific and they take Hong Kong. And here is what happens. The US and the United Kingdom declare war on Japan. Natural. But the US only declares war on Japan. It doesn't declare war on the others of the Axis. Why? Because Roosevelt cannot persuade racists, Americans, that Nazi racists are the bad people. He can't. He doesn't feel confident enough. So there's only a declaration of war on Japan. Well, this opens the possibility of a situation where the United States of America is fighting Japan, but it is at peace with Germany. Okay? Well, thankfully for the Western world, democracy, capitalism, liberalism, communism, whatever the hell you want, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini decided to declare war on the United States themselves. So, can we read the declaration of war on the United States by Adolf Hitler? Because we have to understand what the hell is going on here. You're fighting the Soviet Union, your ally has attacked them, and the Americans haven't declared war on you. Why don't you just sit back and enjoy it, man? You know, fight the Soviets, fight the British, no need to pick a fight with the US. With Hitler is 9. So, can you read the speech? Let me see, who was it? Yes, is it Sue?
Yes.
Go for it.
So the whole speech is about Hitler telling us the relation of Germany with other nations and justifying why he went to war. So he criticizes Britain's Britain's balance of power mechanism, and for Germany they only wanted economic gains, but England accuses Germany for having the desire of invading Baltic states and taking their liberties. Despite this tension, Hitler proposes peace to England, but British people reject. So, from German point of view, Britain forces German people in war in 2 fronts. Hitler first built European front, and he used offensive warfare strategy. He attacked the British Navy to show them the war they have caused, and the second front is North African front. England creates crisis in North Africa, where some parts belong to Italy, and Germany Italian, because of this, counterattacks England. The German African army also supports Germany, so Hitler protects the North African front. The Soviet-Germany relation. For lasting peace in Europe, Hitler decides to eliminate the tension between Germany and Russia. Their relation is based on utility, but Germany's feelings are not hostile to Soviet Union. So Hitler believes that Kremlin wants to destroy and dominate the whole Europe, and he believes that people should thank Germany because of its courage to fight with Soviets. Poland-Germany relation. Hitler says the German people were treated badly in Poland. He suggested a peace settlement to solve issues between Germany and Polish, and he blames the Treaty of Versailles because it brought some ridiculous frontiers, according to him. And Poland refused the peace proposal. And US-Germany relation. So Hitler tells that Germany never had a colony in US and it never had a hostile attitude toward US. But then President Wilson and Roosevelt created conflict between them. First of all, Germany's believed in Wilson's principle and Versailles, but then they had political and economic collapse and they blamed Wilson for that. And Hitler believes Versailles was a mandate. He really hates Roosevelt. He says that Roosevelt was a rich guy, but Hitler is from a poor and lower class. And when they came to power, Roosevelt had political advantage of this class, while Hitler was unknown. They both became president when their countries were in economically bad situation, but Roosevelt increased his country's debt by choosing a Jewish consultant. And Jews, according to Hitler, Jews do not like order but disintegration. They destroy people and property. And Roosevelt couldn't prosper his country while Germany overcome inflation and unemployment. So this Hitler accuses the leadership style and democracy of US. So he then tells about what Roosevelt did. Should I explain what
No, you
Roosevelt
don't have to
did?
go fully, but try
Okay.
to summarize the accusations.
So he sabotaged appeasement policy.
1943 starts with the end of the Battle of Stalingrad. And in the end of the Battle of Stalingrad, the Soviets are able to encircle and destroy a whole German army, the Sixth Army, but also importantly destroy the Romanian army, plus most of the Allied Axis armies in Russia. With the German defeat, the Germans are also forced to lift the siege of Leningrad, one of the longest sieges in modern history. And this leads to the massive Soviet offensive of the summer of 1943. In it, 275 Soviet divisions attacked 260 Axis divisions. And despite some Axis successes, the Soviets drive the Axis out of Ukraine. So over here, you can see in this map, 1943, advances over here. It's very crucial. Most of the successes of the 1941 period of the German invasion failed. The Germans now are on the defensive on the Eastern Front. There's no return anymore. The rest of Europe and Africa, North Africa, the United States, United Kingdom, and French fleet forces under de Gaulle destroy the African corps and bring to an end the campaign. North Africa is now permanently in the hands of the Allies, which weakens Mussolini's position within Italy and also permits the Allies to now invade Italy. They unload troops in Sicily in Operation Husky, which leads the royal government to force Mussolini to resign. Remember, unlike Nazi Germany, where Hitler more or less has become dominant by 1936, 1937, in Italy, Mussolini always had to share power with conservative elites around the border. So now those conservative elites take advantage of the defeats and the disillusionment of the Italian people and even the fasci with Mussolini to throw him out. The Italian government surrounds the Allies, and as a result, the Germans invade Italy, and they also attack Italian troops in the rest of the world, in the Balkans. So in Yugoslavia and in Greece, you have a very funny or tragic or comedic situation where Italian troops are fighting the Germans at the same time that they're fighting the partisans. The invasion of Italy itself is not well planned out and operated, and the Nazis are able to hold northern Italy under their control, where they established Benito Mussolini now as the leader of the Italian Social Republic. So a republic. Here's a map, the invasion of Sicily, and from Sicily they invade into, they take Sardinia up there, and then they invade south of Italy, and they're defeated outside of Rome. The Asia Pacific, American industrial power simply becomes to tell. The Allies launched massive counterattacks in which they fight essentially for every island as they get closer to the home islands. I want you to see what I mean when I mean massive industrial power. This is American production of naval units starting from 1938 all the way to 1944. Now, when it comes to battleships, not much changes, okay? They don't build a lot because they're crucial point of between 1941 and 1944, the Americans go from 4 fleet carriers to the process to 25. Escort carriers from 1 to 65. 61, destroyers, which are key for convoy duty, from 112 to 367, frigates, 376, submarines, from 54 to 230, minesweepers, 640, patrol boats, from 34 to 1,183. Generally speaking, the American Navy goes from 159 to 827 by 1944. The Japanese economy cannot compete. 1944 enters with continued attacks on the Eastern Front. Soviet offensives continued. Soviet troops reached Poland and Romania. The arrival of Soviet troops in Poland sparks the Warsaw Uprising, where democratic or nationalist Polish forces tried to liberate Warsaw before the Soviets arrived, in the hopes of making a stake to the post-war situation. Well, the Soviets, despite being potentially able to save Warsaw, actually refused to help it and let the Hitler and the Nazis kill all of the Polish nationalists, so they don't have to deal with them afterwards. Romania and Bulgaria surrendered to the Allies, to the Soviets, and then declared war on Nazi Germany. So Romanian and Bulgarian troops, especially Bulgarian troops, that didn't see much action in the war except from killing Greek guerrillas and Serbian guerrillas, are now seeing action against Hungary and the Nazis in Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia and in Greece, throughout the period, there was partisan warfare, mostly by left-wing nationalist groups. The partisans of Tito in Yugoslavia, the EAM in Greece, and in combination with Soviet offensives, this leads to the decision of the Germans to withdraw from the Balkans. So the Germans essentially preferred to defend what used to be Austria-Hungary and Prussia against the expected Soviet offensive. This leads to the beginning of the massive Battle of Budapest, the large, great battle of the German army outside of Germany. In Western Europe, on this day, the United States and the United Kingdom, together with Free French forces, Polish forces, and other forces, land in Normandy in one of the biggest air naval operations in the history of humanity, and drive to the Rhine, Paris, Brussels, parts of the Netherlands, and Italy. There is an attempted German counterattack at the Ardennes. This is a very quick history of World War II, by the way, which is momentarily successful, but then essentially defeated, and the Allies prepare for a final drive to Germany. In Italy, the Allies are able to drive to Rome and Florence, but they're blocked. They cannot break through the northern Apennines. This is the situation in Europe in 1944. Look how quickly the maps of the world change. Because now we are in full industrial warfare. World War I was a modern war, but World War II was the fully industrial warfare. Now armies move faster. Technology of destruction are quicker. What used to take maybe a whole 4 years can now happen in the space of a month. All of this is territories lost by the Germans in 1944. Okay? This is lost. This is what is under control of the Nazi Empire and its allies at the end of Nazi. The 1,000-year Reich of 1940. Okay, remember this was the map in 1940. It's now been turned into nothing more than a Central European revolution. So I guess it wasn't a good idea invading the Soviet Union. Actually, Hitler himself said that. 1942, he met with Field Marshal Mannerheim, the leader of Finland. This is the only recording we have of Hitler speaking in which he talks freely, independently. Let me have you listen to it. This is an interesting small part of history that you might find very interesting. And he essentially says at some point that If I knew that Stalin had so many tanks and such ability to make up the losses, I would never have invaded. But by then it was too late. Work. Their voice, not the one he would use in official discussions and stuff like that. You get an idea of his excuses, essentially, for not knowing that the Soviets had a massive economy. By the way, he claims we cannot do a winter campaign, but as I said, in World War I, the Germans won on the Eastern Front. This is all of incompetence, not underestimating his enemy. Frankly, in a racist video. 1944, in the Asia Pacific, sees a continued advance of U.S. troops to the Marshall Islands at the beginning of the reconquest of the Philippines. Late Gulf, and the Philippines around the islands of the Philippines, and within which the archipelago of the Philippines is the greatest air naval battle in the history of the human race is fought. The United States with 196 the faces the Japanese with 277 ships and 1,600 aircraft. This battle, the US wins decisively and completely destroys the Japanese navy. What follows is probably one of the greatest crimes of war in history. The Americans start bombing Japanese cities using firebombs, napalm. See, Japanese cities are built from wood back then. The primary material of Japanese building was wood. That included the factories. So instead of bombing them in a normal way, the Americans bombed them with firebombs, essentially turning the cities into these massive firestorms and burning them to the ground. In Tehran, Casablanca, 1943, the leaders of the Allied powers, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is suffering from polio and now is forced to use I don't remember the name, a wheelchair. Joseph Stalin and Churchill meet. And they agree that the Allied powers will not make a separate peace with the Axis powers. As we just heard, the Axis already had said that they will not make separate pieces. So now the Allies agree on that. And that the Axis powers must surrender unconditionally, that there will be no conditional surrender like in World War I. There will be no negotiations. They will give up and they will submit fully to the peace of the victor. Now, the decision for unconditional surrender is driven by three motives. First of all, they want to avoid a repetition of World War I, where when Germany was defeated, the German commander said, we were not defeated on the field, we were betrayed by our politicians. Bulgarians always explain all defeats in the history of Bulgaria by saying Bulgarians win on the battlefield and are betrayed at the negotiating table. This is exactly what the Germans had claimed in World War I. And the Allied leaders have decided this time that German army must be humiliated and forced to surrender, with no question of being able to claim that it was betrayed. This time, the German generals will be forced to publicly say, we were defeated. The Wehrmacht was defeated, the Luftwaffe was defeated, the Kriegsmarine was defeated, the German war machine and the German officer class were outclassed. finally, they actually decided that the only way to make peace this time is to make sure that the social and political systems and economic systems of the defeated powers are completely changed. In World War I, the defeated powers were permitted to figure out the political systems on their own. This was blamed as a problem, that the social conditions or political elites that had created World War I survived and built World War II. So now the decision was, if Italy, Japan, but in Britain, if Japan and Germany are conquered, the Japanese and German economic, social, political will change. Obviously, no country in the world will accept that if it hasn't surrendered unconditionally. Third, they are still scared and they don't trust each other. The Allies are scared that Stalin will cut a deal with Hitler, and Stalin is scared that the Allies will cut a deal with the Germans, especially if Hitler is overthrown. So by this agreement, they feel they have locked each other down. So can you write down in your notebook, at least one of the three reasons why the Allies decided on unconditional surrender? I just gave you three reasons why the Allies decided on unconditional surrender. Write at least one of them down. Can you write one reason down? I gave you three. Can you write one of those reasons down? I just did it. Yes. Or why the Allies decided on unconditional surrender? With that decision, around 1944, the reasons for that is, write at least one reason down. Okay? So we enter 1945. In Europe, there's the final drive by the Allies, the Soviets and the Allies into Germany. The Soviets take Poland and Hungary, while the Allies drive from the Rhine into Bavaria. At Yalta, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill meet and they plan a post-war war. They already start discussing the future of Europe and of the world after the war. The Soviet and US armies meet on the river Elbe, eastern Germany, and in Italy, the German-Italian front collapses. Mussolini is captured and executed by the partisans who show his dead body publicly. On April 20th, May 1st, the Battle of Berlin happens, and Hitler commits suicide when it's clear that there are no more German troops to sacrifice. A great movie about this is called Downfall, Der Untergang. It's about the last days of Hitler. It's a very good film. I suggest that if you want to learn more about the final moments. Thus, on May 7th, 1945, the new German Führer, Admiral Dönitz, orders the unconditional surrender of all German military forces still in Europe. Thus, World War II comes to an end in Europe. That deep blue you see there, that is what is left of the German Empire at the end of 1945. So, in a weird way, the Czech part of Czechoslovakia, the fraction of which started this path to the war, actually survived the war largely unscathed because it wasn't attacked. It was the last part of the German Empire, together with parts of Austria and northern Italy, that was actually controlled by the German government. The Asia Pacific, the United States continues operations to try and conquer islands and prepare for a final showdown. Under the very tough battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The British launched the Southeast Asia campaign, which they drive slowly the Japanese out of Indochina and of Burma. The US launches the greatest air offensive in history. Even today, the magnitude of that air offensive has not been overcome. The Japanese army just refused to surrender. Unlike the Germans, they just refused to surrender. It continues on. Partly because the army's constituency, which has a general China, still firepower. Mostly the Navy is doing all the fighting and dying, the Air Force is doing all the fighting and dying, and those Japanese forces in Burma. So the Americans have to make a choice. They either have to lend the Japanese home islands in Operation Olympic, which would have been the greatest and largest amphibious operation in the history of the air, and where the Americans expected to at least lose 300,000 to 500,000 troops, and Japanese losses to be in the multi-millions, or to use a new weapon that has just been invented called the atomic bombs. On August 6, 1945, the American government decides to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The first one in Hiroshima, and the next one on Nagasaki. The hope is to force a crisis of confidence in the Japanese government that leads to accommodations to take power from the military. At the same time, the Soviet Union, having now finished its war in Europe, launches an invasion of East Asia, Japanese East Asia, and starts destroying the Kwantung Army. Between August 10 and August 14, 1945, there is a crisis in the Japanese government. The emperor decides to surrender. There is an attempted coup by highlanders under Colonel Araki. This is defeated. And on September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrenders to the Allies on one condition. Unlike the Germans, to unconditional surrender, the Japanese are able to get one condition, that the institution of the emperor will be maintained in the post-war system. That surrender, World War II comes to an end. This is what is left to the Japanese empire. And as you can see, it is much more substantial than the Germans. There are 1.5 million Japanese troops in China, another 1 million in Manchuria, another 2 million in Korea, 500,000 in the forces, as you can see. But the point is, the Japanese army is over here, and the Japan is over here. Ultimately, the men who led Japan to this war, the army generals, cannot defend the country. World War II is a war of atrocities. World War I had its own atrocities. Belgium, the Ottoman Empire, in occupied Serbia, and the Caucasus. World War II completely changes the game. On the side of the Axis, they commit genocide against the Jews, the Jewish Holocaust. They attempt to exterminate Poles, Russians, Ukrainian Slavs, and Gypsies, the Roma. They bombard cities. They bombarded Warsaw, the destruction, Leningrad, Shanghai. They massacred civilians in China, Ethiopia, and in Europe. They conducted human experimentation, and they launched unrestricted submarine warfare, which was a crime of war. But the Allies also committed crimes. The United States and UK bombarded and firebombed American, German, and Japanese cities. By the way, more Japanese people died by the firebombings than they died by the actual atomic bombs. The firebombings killed something like millions. The atomic bombs killed about 100,000 or 40,000 together. Dropping of the atomic bombs. The Soviets conducted essentially a campaign of sexual violence and rape in Eastern Europe. Something like probably close to 1 million German women were raped by the Soviet troops when they entered into Germany as vengeance. And they also committed ethnic cleansing in Eastern Europe, or they permitted the locals to commit ethnic cleansing in Eastern Final cost of this war, 60 million people killed, 50 million of those are civilians. Unlike World War I, where the majority of the deaths were soldier deaths, in World War II, the vast majority of the deaths were civilians. This was a war targeted at the population. 5 to 6 million Jews are exterminated. About 7 million Slavs, Poles, Ukrainians, Russians are exterminated, and 100,000 to 200,000 Roma. The Soviet Union suffered the largest amount of civilian deaths, followed by China. Okay? Poland also, Indonesia, a lot of the population died to hunger and mistreatment by the Japanese. From the Axis, Germany had the biggest number of civilian deaths, funnily enough. And the other hand, they lost most of their troops, most of the military. So generally speaking, the Axis was very good at killing non-Nazi while the Allies were very good at killing Axis military. That's the end of that. So let's do this. I don't want to give you all talk. So I want to learn about. So let me stop this here.